Hello, now we are going to discuss about hazard profile of India. If you look at multi-hazard mortality risk at global level, and you can find that India finds a place on top in terms of more multi-hazard mortality risk compared to other countries. In general, Asia finds a top place, and within Asia, and India is one among the top countries have more mortality risk. So it is necessary to understand better about hazard profile of India. If you look at number of disaster events in India for the past 120 years, and you can find about 1,500 major disaster events that shatter our country, including both natural and man-made disasters. And if you exclude man-made disasters, especially the accident, because it is highly debatable to include as disaster, and if you consider only the natural disasters, flood, cyclone, and epidemic occupies 80% of share. These three natural hazards or disasters, you can say, create more number of economic damages, deaths, and other consequences as this number is highest compared to other natural hazards. But in terms of number of people affected in India, rather than how many numbers of events happen, you just like look at how many people affected due to the disasters, and the drought plays the first place. About 56% of total affected is due to drought, and if you look at the number as per the record available in the EMDAT, about 140 crores people directly or indirectly affected by a drought in the past 150 years, and followed by flood, which is for about 36 percentage and people affected, and followed by cyclone. So these three events are the dominant in terms of people affected in India. If you look at economic damage, this is the statistics for the past 120 years, and about 60 percentage of economic damage in India due to disaster is caused by flood, and about 30 percentage caused by cyclone. Cyclone and flood altogether damage 90 percentage of our infrastructure, and these two are also finds a place in number of highly occurring disasters in India. If you take a death toll, a number of deaths in India in the past 120 years, 96 percentage of major deaths or total deaths happened due to two events or two disasters, one is epidemic and drought. And of course, this is excluding the current ongoing COVID scenario. If you include that, even the percentage of epidemic will increase, and next epidemic drought occupies. Because of these two events, we witnessed major death toll, especially in beginning of last century. So in our country, flood is the most frequently occurring natural disaster, followed by cyclone, and the main killers are epidemics and drought. And of course, more than 90 percentage of people affected directly or indirectly by drought and flood, and more economic damage, more than 90 percentage of economic damage caused by flood and cyclone. So our country has multi-hazard risk in terms of flood, in terms of epidemics, in terms of drought, in terms of cyclone. In addition, if you look at number of people died and affected and also caused economic damage for the past 120 years, and you can able to extract the top 20 events, and you can find beginning of last century more of epidemic and drought, and latter part of last century due to like storms, earthquakes, and this century, if you look at, and you will find like flood. So altogether, epidemic, drought, earthquake, cyclone, and flood have affected more people than other disasters. And if you look at the location, and it is like almost affected all the regions, including like all the disasters. If you look at total affected, and of course all these disaster contribute or affect the people. And if you talk about like the total damage, all these disasters contribute. And even if you look at the relative index, which is called as consumer price index, based on like after a disaster, how much like a damage happened. If you look at in recent years, it is like a showing high, which shows that more amount of economic damage we are witnessing due to multitude effects of these disasters. If you focus exclusively the last 2 decades from 2000 to 2022, and 7 of top 10 disasters that induce high economic damage is by floods. So flood is most frequently occurring natural disasters in the past 2 decades and create more economic damage, and followed by the cyclone. Although we witnessed Fuji earthquake in 2001, which also shares or appears in the top 10. In addition, if you consider the total death also, in addition to total damage, and you can find the place of tsunami and extreme temperature, in addition to earthquake, flood, and cyclone, which affects more like, the people as well as create more death. Altogether, earthquake, tsunami, cyclone, extreme temperature are the disasters in addition to flood which contribute higher damages and more death toll in India. And to surprise, 8 of top 10 disasters that have induced high economic damages have occurred in the last 2 decades. So it is necessary to understand the profile of these disasters in brief in order to develop or in order to educate, in order to make a plan to reduce the disaster risk in India. If you look at flood hazard in India, of course, it is nationwide and many places. Wherever you find more number of population density, of course, you can find flood as well. But on a national scale, on relative scale, if you look at the Ganges plain and like Brahmaputra plain and coastal plains of India have more like a chances of getting floods with higher intensities. So these like yellow, orange colored marked areas are frequently appeared in national news in terms of flood disasters. And of course, in order to control flood, we have considered the construction of dam. And if you look at the statistics, just during our independence time, our number of dams in India is just 300 or 300 million population. But in 2018, the statistics showed that the number of dams in India is about 5,200. If you look at the exponential growth of dams, it is higher than the population growth, okay, which shows we are trying to control the flood by like constructing dam and other measures. These dams not only for like flood control, even for other purposes, especially for electricity generation and irrigation. But this like plays a major role in like reducing disasters, flood disasters. Other end or other side of the story is that this flood uh, nowadays like caused by the dams, because we are storing water for like, especially for summer times, especially for generation of electricity power. But the overflow of like a dam, and thereafter any high intensity of rainfall cause, which will lead to frequent like floods. So that is common now, and large dam induced floods are creating more havoc than the natural like flood. That also we should understand. The next most important disaster in India is drought. And if you look at the drought statistics, almost all the areas are prone to drought. And on relative scale, if you look at and the areas marked the red color here are frequently affected by drought. In addition, the marked in other colors also appeared in the news of drought. So drought is a common phenomena, especially in southern India, especially in the states like Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. So where rainfall-induced drought or hydrological droughts are common, which affects lakhs and lakhs of people. And if you look at the map of cyclone hazard, cyclone hazard, of course, you know about it. It is most frequently affect the east coast of India. East coast of India is highly liable to like a cyclone hazard, especially the states like Odisha, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu is frequently affected by the cyclones. If you look at earthquake is one of the most deadliest disaster, and you know that the like 2001 Fuji earthquake like create the highest death toll in the past like 20 years. The earthquake is most pronounced in the Himalayan region or northeastern regions and this northwestern like region of India because of the continental plates and continental like the plate boundaries. And these are all the dots shows that the recorded earthquake events with varying intensities, and these colors shows that the major like, earthquake that appeared in the past 120 years. Uh, on world level also, if you look at on our Himalayan like terrain or Himalayan regions finds a place in like a higher seismic or earthquake hazard. So earthquake hazard is very common in like Himalayan and northeastern region. Another important thing is that these regions are gathering tension because of the movement of Indian plate for about 5 centimeters per year with the anti-clockwise rotation. So since the our Indian plate or like continent is moving an anti-clockwise rotation towards north, which building pressure here, and due to that, more number of earthquakes are occurring at uh, in northeastern regions of India. Another side, this side, it's releasing the pressure or like some other pressures are accumulating. So these regions also witnessing major events. So these two regions are most vulnerable in terms of earthquake in addition to the non-Himalayan region. Landslide, if you look at almost all hilly areas are prone to landslide, and of course, the proneness of Himalayan region is very high because of this is Enfold mountain and have a loose sediment like a deposit, so that can easily like move down or slide down and create havoc. So these Himalayan regions, in addition to earthquake, it is also prone to landslides. Even with this northeast region, also prone to landslides. And to wonder, this earthquake normally induce landslides. So the earthquake and landslides are very common phenomena in these regions. In addition to that, there are like a few places in southern India, especially over Western Ghats, which is prone to earthquake, sorry, landslide. Until 2004 tsunami, our people, our administrators, our like researchers not know much about tsunami, but the 2004 tsunami event create a major like, death toll especially in the coast of Tamil Nadu. This like lead to understanding or monitoring the tsunami in India and set up inquiries at Hyderabad to like monitor keenly the tsunami. The tsunami likely to like hit more frequently the southern coast of India, especially the eastern coast of India, because the tsunami is induced mainly due to earthquake uh, under the sea. We can call it a subterranean earthquake under the ocean surface. So that is probably highest over Sumatra and Indonesian regions. So any subterranean or like, submarine earthquakes occur over these regions may cause tsunami waves over eastern coast of India. So in order to like manage the disaster, the government of India has spent a lot of amount or money or resources in the past like 75 years, and the allocation of money also, if you look at it, is like rising exponentially, especially for relief activities. So unless you reduce the risk and the amount required for relief, which will increase year by year. So we have to better study the disasters in India, and we have to reduce the risk, for which understanding vulnerability in India also matters. Already we discussed that vulnerability is very complex, unlike your hazards, but studying and working towards reducing vulnerability is more important. If you look at the global like map, and if you look at some sensitive like information, say for example, storm intensity or cyclone intensity, or plate tectonic boundaries, or even these man-made hazards, nuclear power plants, all like allocated side by side or over the highly populated like, regions. So other regions have a similar setup, but the population density is less. The exposed population to those vulnerable like um, hazards or like um, disasters are less. But whereas in India, the population density is very high, especially where the hazard is very high. So overall, disaster risk is very high compared to other countries. In India, I said in first slide of this presentation, that India need to concentrate more on studying the, the most important components of disaster risk, both hazard and vulnerability. So understanding hazard and vulnerability is very important to reduce disaster risk in India. Thank you for attending this class.